Okay, so thumbnails, yes. Um, is this anyone here who doesn't have any experience doing thumbnails? Anyone? Can you kindly speak up so I can elaborate further? Or do all of you guys have an experience doing this? Nagigets niyo ba? Alright, so again, guys,
Yes.
let me know, okay? Pag may talagang this is their first time encountering this kind of concept. Now, for thumbnails, well, this is usually done. Foremost is it's for exploring ideas. Okay, you want to what do you call this? Explore, let's say, yung camera angle. Let's say you're given a brief, okay? It's one brief, one consistent brief, and you're gonna explore that in four different ways. Usually four. Sometimes it's gonna be more. Depende sa client, depende sa art director, but for us it's gonna be four. It's a good standard. Now, let's say for example, the requirement for this one, this is just for us, internal lang to. It's not really for client work, but it's company work. Kumbaga, these are already established characters from a design. Okay, now my job here is to create a sort of a keyframe. Okay, now the keyframe, the requirement there was it's gonna be the queen or the priestess sitting at the middle, flanked by two commanders or two higher officials. Okay, now I can sort of flex out of that idea. Kumbaga, you can see it here, diba? This guy here can sort of interact with the queen, okay? Or I can go traditional, okay? That all of them are looking straight ahead. Very, very simple setup. And here I could explore maybe this guy here is talking to someone off screen, and then these two are a bit stiff or a bit static, okay? And then here on the fourth setup, I have here this queen interacting with the audience, and then these two here are the static folks. Okay, so that's the kind of idea that's going on when you're creating thumbnails. Okay, so you're exploring what kind of things that you could go through given one brief. Okay, so on this part here, diba, for the past 4 weeks, we've been doing a lot of technical stuff. Now this time it's more here, more creative stuff. Okay, so now although yes, it's a bit mundane yung setup natin. It's a bedroom, it's a workstation, diba? It's also although it's a mundane concept, you have to make it a bit more fun. Diba? Yung idea. So you can't just draw a static bedroom. Call it a day. Yung parang dorm type bedroom. Okay? Kasi a big criteria for your midterms when you do it, kasi pipili tayo ng isa eh. You have to what do you call this? Um show good creativity, diba? Exploring ideas, and then at the same time executing that ideas using a good technical mastery in your drawings. Okay, so you need dalawa. Those two combos will give you a good grade. Okay, so questions so far? You guys good? Okay, now aside from that, aside from those things that I've been doing here, exploring ideas, I'm also exploring um, the perspective of the shot. For example, here it's a bit from below, diba? Here it's slightly looking up. Well, not looking up, rather it's looking down on them. It's a bit higher than the actors. This one, it's almost the same. The eye level is, or the horizon is at the eye of the queen. This one's the same also, but for each of these four shots, they represent for the camera angles represent a different mood. So usually when you have something that's looking down, it represents a more intimidating shot. Okay, feels like you're looking above or looking up from a deity or a goddess, right? This one, um, this one, this one is a different feel. I don't know how to explain it, but this one I wanted this angle to be higher up so I can use this as a foreground for depth at the back. This one is a bit more formal, right? So the perspective is like this. So the perspective that you choose again dictates the mood of the piece. So this one is more relaxed. Okay, now for us, yes, we have four shots, right? But for us, I will set the angle to something more consistent for all of us. I can't ask you guys na iba baba, iba pataas yung angle. We're gonna make it a bit more, let's say, perspective. Let's say this is the midpoint, right? The horizon line, it's gonna be a bit higher up. Kasi the purpose of our design here is to explore the space. So I can't have you guys do a shot like this. Okay? Okay? So this one, you can't really explore the layout if it's like this. Kapag pag tingnan niyo yung camera sa baba, okay? It's hard to see the space. So we want the shot to be higher up. So yung perspective na ganyan. And another thing, it's gonna be in 2-point perspective. Okay? So later I will show you more what do we call this? More samples. Okay, so eventually it's gonna be like this, the final shot. Kung magpipili kayo ng isa, and then you're gonna finalize it like this. Kumbaga, here you will explore a lot of things about the positions of your elements. Now I'm talking about here characters, but this concept still applies to backgrounds, to any other element in your composition. Because these are just design pieces. These are just, okay, if you zoom out, you can just see, okay, that these are just shapes that I'm designing. So that's the thing here about thumbnailing. Okay, you're not just dealing with drawings, you're also dealing with shapes, designing shapes. Now if I zoom out, again, you can see here, right, different shapes, different sizes. Then you can see here, guys, if I add a shape here, you see here a triangle. Okay, so these are subliminal shapes that binds my thumbnail to to have it to give it a good design. Okay, hindi lang siya sa technical ability of drawing, let's say, a head. Diba? It's all about yung the interactions of the shapes. So for example here, you have the shape like this, and then you have the shape of the queen like this, then you have this, and then if I put an arrow here, you can see here there's a movement. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on when it comes to thumbnailing. You will be exploring composition. Okay, now for example here, the shape here is mostly a rectangle. This one is a bit more triangular, and this one is a bit more circular. Okay, those are just some devices that you could use to improve your compositions. Okay, you bind them into shapes. Another thing that you should be taking into consideration, okay, when you're doing thumbnails is the placement of your focal point. Now, for us, you have two choices on which one is going to be your focal point, either the bedroom or your workstation. Okay, now when you're doing your shots, you can't be like this. I'm gonna show you a really really bad example. Okay, so here's the thumbnail of the student. Now the problem here is, well, the perspective is okay, but there's no direction. What am I looking at? Right? It's as an artist, it's up to you to direct the shot. Where are you supposed to look? Now here, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to look. There's no focal point. Maybe this one is passable, maybe this one. But for the rest, well, I can't. I'm not sure, right? Because this part right here, this foreground element here is covering too much of the space in your composition. Same thing here. This space or this foreground element here is covering maybe your focal point. Okay, so it's obstructing everything. It's actually a bit distracting. Now, it's up to you guys to create something that has a good placement of the focal point. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's go back here on my thumbnails. You can see here that here, 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 here. So these are my focal points. And as you can see, it's not they're not exactly dead in the middle. So I'm gonna place a line here. Okay, I'm gonna place a line here, place a line here, and place a line here. They're centered, but they're a bit off to the side or to the top. Okay, so here's a typical here's kasi sa akin for this brief, diba, it's a bit regal, it's a bit formal. So I opted to use a focal point in position na I wanted it to be a bit centered. So nasa gitna. But it's not really super duper centered. Okay, the same thing goes for you guys. When you're having your focal point, you don't want it exactly in the middle. Because if you place it in the middle, it's gonna be so boring. So, for example, if you place it here, like so, dead smack in the middle, your focal point, you see here all the quadrants here are equal in space. And equality, you set symmetry, that formal symmetry is so boring for composition. You want it to be more dynamic. But you have the rule of thirds, right? So you can opt to divide your canvas like this into three quadrants, and then you can choose to place your focal point here. That's another device that you could use. Or you could maybe move it slightly off center here, maybe here, maybe here, maybe here. Okay, now these are just guides. Okay, you don't have to necessarily follow all of them to a T. A T pa, okay, sir, dito yung focal point ko dito exactly. Okay, now, so when you're thumbnailing, good it's also good for you guys to be loose, diba? To experiment. So these are just suggestions. Now, if your piece calls for something that's not necessarily placed here, your focal point, that's okay as long as it looks good. Kumbaga, for the people who are having a hard time placing them, well, you can place them here. Now, sometimes um, by instinct, okay, guys, um, you will start to place these things on these particular areas. Hindi nyo na napapansin, you're placing them there. Minsan ganun na siya eh. Now, you can also observe them in different shots. Uh, let's say here. Okay. These are not my thumbnails. These are just from a different artist. Ito yung Instagram niya. But, yeah, you can see it here. Tingnan nyo ah. Placement of the focal point. It's not really dead in the center. It's placed on a good position somewhere off the middle. You see it? You see it when I add the crosses, you can see how interesting the shapes are in division of space. So that's the thing here with composition. You have to create a good or a appealing placement of shapes. Okay? Now, the placement of your focal point allows you to create interesting shapes. Okay? So what do I mean by shapes? Well, the shapes are gonna be, well, for example, if you place the house here at the back, okay, you have an opportunity to create a bigger shape here at the foreground. Okay, so this bigger shape can be, well, a tree, maybe a fence, I don't know. As long as you can have this kind of setup, this kind of shape here, you will create a more interesting design overall. Okay, and another thing, oops, wait lang, my tablet died. Let me charge my tablet. Another thing that you should do is also the scale of your thumb of the scale of your what do you call this, the scale of your focal point, how close it is in your camera. For example, here, these are very far, far away from the camera. So it's gonna be, well, obviously a smaller shape. So once again, you can have that opportunity to create bigger shapes on the foreground. Now let's say here, the focal point is very big. It dominates the space. Now the surrounding elements are gonna be a bit smaller, right? So when you have a big shape, a small shape, you have contrast. And that's also good for composition, right? You have contrast. Okay, so here is another good setup. You have shapes here. You see this part, guys? How this tree here is covering a portion of the house. Well, that's what you call an overlap. Okay, overlaps are also very good for composition because when you're overlapping shapes, let's say you have a house here, right? Other in a typical setup, ganyan siya. It's a complete house. But if you want to make it more interesting, you could opt to create overlaps. Maybe have a part of that house obscured by a bigger element at the foreground. Let's say, kunwari ako, ito yung portrait ko, pwede kong lagyan ng frame dito sa gilid. Maybe there's something obstructing part of my face. That division or that overlap, again, creates interest in the audience. Hindi lang, oh wow, bahay. Me parang there's a sense of mystery involved. So here is another setup for that. You have the gate overlapping on the shape of the house. Okay, now tingnan nyo, I've indicated a bunch of blobs of shapes here in my study or in my breakdown of these thumbnails. As you can see, again, if I zoom out, you can see that the sizes, the shapes are different. Hindi sila pare-pares. Um, it's not gonna be like this. Okay, the setup, right, diba? Bahay, puno. Diba? You have a fence. So this is a bad setup. This is a very bad example of showing a thumbnail. Kasi there's no interest here. Diba? You've shown a frontal shot of a house, then trees at the side, and then the fence at the front. There's no interesting way of incorporating these elements. Kumbaga, you presented them as is. Kumbaga, okay, bahay, puno, may fence. That's it. Okay? But this one is, it can be technically good, can be well drawn, but it's gonna be boring, unfortunately. So these are good examples of how you could explore a boring idea. Okay, a house inside a forest with a fence. But you can explore different setups using the shapes, manipulating the shapes, the distance, okay, the overlaps of your elements. Question so far? Get now? Okay, so let's show a good example of thumbnails that some of my students have done before. Let's see. This one's good, drawing wise. Okay, so here you can see here opportunities for the foreground elements, diba? But for me, I would have loved to have these lines a bit more darker. Kasi right now, masyadong manipis. Although the drawings are good, it's just hard to see them from a distance. Kasi the purpose of a thumbnail is it's supposed to read well on a distance. Ito, tingnan nyo, di ba? From afar, yan siya. So that's why I also ask you guys to create them in 3 by 6 inches. Maliit lang siya. Kasi that's really the point of thumbnails. It's not really about the details. It's more about exploring the composition of your room. Okay, so tingnan nyo ito. Diba? So you have a foreground here. Uh, foreground here. And then, tingnan nyo yung pwesto ng mga focal point niya. It's gonna be here. It's gonna be here. It's gonna be here. It's not dead center. Okay. Let's see here another example. Uh, okay, here. Here is a hindi na siya thumbnail, but here's a kumbaga work in progress ng student ko from before. Now you can see here, tingnan nyo, yung the shot itself, the way he presented the room. It's very interesting, very dynamic yung shot. Kumbaga, if you look at this, kumbaga yung room, it's nothing special. Kumbaga yung simple setup lang ng room, nothing fancy going on, but the way he chose his shot, yung camera angle, okay, it it made this a bit more cooler than it actually is, and that's good. Kumbaga uh, he went he created or he showed something that's actually mundane or simple into something more really interesting or cool. And another thing that I liked about this is, aside from that, maganda yung drawing. It's technically well done. Tingnan nyo. You can see here a lot of construction stuff. Okay, a lot of effort in making sure that these are drawn properly in the space. And speaking of space, okay, you can see here again the perspective. Now, when you're doing your perspective lines, I want you guys to have them in a different color than black so I can see them properly. Okay? Now, any more questions? You got questions so far, guys? Wala.
Question na po.
Yes, yes. Questions? Yes, Juliana.
So in the four different thumbnails, just as a short question, we draw the room, but it's in different places.
Oh, yes. Good question. Good questions. Yes. When you're drawing the room, it's gonna be four different ideas. What's consistent in all the four thumbnails is it's gonna be a room that has a workstation. But for each thumbnail, it has to have a different setup. Kumbaga, you can choose to maybe have maybe two thumbnails that are close in theme. Kumbaga, there's just gonna be a slight variation. Okay, or you can opt to have them four thumbnails distinctly different with each other. Okay, gets nyo? It's not gonna be the same room on a different shot. Hindi ganun. They have to be four different rooms, distinct rooms with different ideas. Okay, nagets mo ba, Juliana? Hello?
Gets.
Okay. For the rest of you, nagets nyo ba?
Yes po.
Okay. So, uh, this one's not good. Saan yun? Okay, this one also, although this is a bad example drawing-wise, but kumbaga, these are four different rooms. Kumbaga, it's not really about changing the whole layout. Kumbaga, hindi naman kanya-kanyang fancy shape yung room. Pwedeng ibahin nyo lang yung pwesto ng kama, iba yung design ng kama. Okay, maybe the other room has a balcony, the other one doesn't have a balcony. Isa parang cabin style, gawa sa wood lahat. Okay, so ganun siya. Um, so let's move on and okay, I'm gonna show you another example that you shouldn't follow. Okay, pag ito bagsak agad to ha. Kasi this one is wrong in perspective. Although this is not a student work, okay? I'm just showing an example of what we shouldn't do. Okay, right now, although yes, this is a good drawing, but this drawing doesn't provide a good idea. It's not showing your creativity. So dun pa lang sa creativity, zero na kayo. Well, meron siguro maybe 10 points for that, but it's a bare minimum that you could do. And this is something I don't want to see. Kasi that means you're not really exploring your ideas well enough. This is a basic room. It's well drawn, yes. Sure, it's well drawn. Wala akong masasabi dun. But I'm criticizing the way you're exploring your ideas. So this is the point of the thumbnails. Okay? Um, So let's see. Here's a good example. Again, these are not my drawings kasi guys, I'm not really I haven't done backgrounds in a long while, so I don't have any good examples. So I just search these stuff online. Okay, so I think this one is a I don't know. Hindi ko malala kung saan galing to. But as you can see here, tingnan nyo. You can see here how interesting everything is. There's clutter. Yes, may clutter. Okay, but the clutter is organized well. So how do you what do you mean by that, sir? Well, tingnan nyo ah. You see here, the clutter are grouped together. Hindi sila kalat-kalat na masabi lang na may kalat. Okay? You can make things messy, but they have to be organized too. Kumbaga, may art direction. You can see it in film, in animated movies. Na when you're creating a mess, it has to still flow. Kasi it has to look good. And tingnan nyo ha, there's a bunch of mess around this area, but look at this. This one doesn't have much detail. So that means when you're creating mess, you have to organize them in some areas, and then there are areas of rest. So ganun siya in composition. You can't bombard your shot with so much detail. You have to have a breathing room. So for example, you have them here. Breathing room. We'll leave it plain because you have so much things happening here that if you add detail here at the ceiling, it's gonna make your um, your shot or your composition hard to see. Yung design mo masyado, it's gonna be too daunting. It's gonna be too heavy on the eyes. Masakit sa mata. Okay, so once again, find opportunities of rest. So tingnan nyo, here's another area of rest. So I'm marking in red yung areas of clutter, diba? But at the same time, they have areas of rest. Okay, so kumbaga, it's controlled chaos, basically. Okay, so another thing, going back, kumbaga, I said a while ago, right? You're organizing shapes. So tingnan nyo, look at the foreground element here. So you have here a mug, right? Then you have a book, and then a bunch of paper here. Now what the artist did here was, you also have here itong collection of pens and scissors, container niya, diba? These are distinct elements, right? But what he did was, in order to make it more cohesive, kasi you're also worried about the whole thing, the overall presentation of your shot. So what he did to make things more streamlined, more simple, was he combined everything into one shape, basically. You see it? Okay, it happens again and again. So that's a typical setup that you could use to control the details in your room. Yan siya. Diba? You have shapes. Same thing here. Actually, kasama pa nga yung computer dito in the keyboard. So what I mean by this also is you also have to look at the silhouette of your elements. Don't just worry about, okay, I'm drawing this coffee mug, and then I'm drawing this paper and drawing this book. You also have to think them how you could link them together to make them simpler and to create a more interesting shape overall. Tingnan nyo yung shape pag zoom out ko. Diba? These are readable shapes na nakasilhouette lang. And you're linking them together to simplify things. Kasi pag pinag-iwahiwalay niyan, let's say ganyan, 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 the audience will look at so many elements. na if you just combine them, you simplify them, okay, titignan niya, okay, there's a big shape here, and then, oh wow, at this shape, meron palang mug, may coffee book, may paper, and all that. Kumbaga, the audience is thinking first of the general big shape, and then afterwards, they're gonna appreciate the finer details inside that shape. The same thing is happening here. Dikit-dikit sila lahat. So that's a way for you guys to handle clutter in your shot. And I really like the clutter. Okay, kasi it shows character. I don't want it to look very, very formal. So, teka. Ano ba yung example ko? Okay, let's go back here. Diba? So this one, maybe this is your ideal bedroom. Maybe. Maybe ganyan ang buhay nyo. May super duper minimalist. Okay, but this one doesn't have any character. You it looks like a display bedroom. On the other hand, you have this, diba? There's so much character, but it's fun to look at. There's so much stuff going on. It's intriguing. Okay, ano ka nangyayari dito? Maybe, for example, ito, maybe this area here can be the workstation itself, right? But there's so many design choices here, and kumaga, there's more intrigue in this shot compared to, well, not this one, sorry, compared to this one. Now, how could you um, do this shot? Well, you also have to think of maybe include story elements in your shot. Kumbaga, I gave you a generic brief, but you can go further with that, and maybe you can add more. What do you call this? You can add more specific details na that would suit the character of the room. So, ibig sabihin, maybe isipin yung protagonist. Ano kaya siya? Anong ugali niya? Maybe he likes to pray traditionally. Maybe he is a bit messy. So, ibig sabihin, you can show that character in the room itself. Kumbaga, you can show bits of paint splattered at the room or at the floor. Maybe there's a bunch of oil paint at this side of the room. Maybe there's a bunch of spare canvases lying around the room. Okay, so maybe your protagonist also can be a shoe collector. So madami siyang shoe collector at the side. Maybe ano siya, addict siya sa hot toys. So you can have a stand of toys out on the other side of the bedroom. Okay? So those have to be informed choices. Kumbaga, the details that you're adding in your room should show the character that's living there. So keyword here is living. So I want to see a room that's lived in. Okay, hindi ganito na IKEA. It's not an IKEA bedroom that we're trying to design. Hindi tayo we're not industrial design. We're not interior design. Diba? Animation tayo. And our purpose, well, is to show a story. Now, dito, wala tayong character. Diba? But the way we can show character and story is by showing details that hint of the character or the personality of whatever it is or whoever it is that's inhabiting this room. Okay, gets it ba? So here's another example right here. Uh, this one's good also. Now, compared to here, medyo mas may character to, di ba? Medyo messy. Dito naman, madami din details, but this one has a more formal feeling. Kumbaga, kanya-kanya kayong discarding. Ano ba yung gusto nyong parating doon sa shot nyo? What kind of mood or personality you want to show in the design? Okay, dito, obviously, I think this one is a superhero, sort of. You can see here, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but I can um, infer or I can deduce stuff based from the details that are shown. So, kumbaga, I'm trying to solve the mystery of who owns this room, 'di ba? So makita niyo dito, oh wow, may costume. Ano kaya 'to? Siya ba nagsuot ng costume na 'to or maybe he is the one designing this costume, 'di ba? You can see here, may gun, may tools. Ibig sabihin, if he is a hero, Maybe he's also tech savvy, di ba? May gauntlet din dito. And then dito, maybe he's actually the hero kasi dinisplay niya tong ano. Parang there is a newspaper here that shows, well, the city is saved. So maybe that shows that he's proud of his achievements. May toys din dito. Our hero, you can see that. Maybe he's also proud of that also. Maybe he's actually the hero, but at the same time, well, he is also designing his own gadgets. And aside from that, tingnan nyo guys, look at the character here of this desk. So much character, 'di ba? Bukas yung mga cabinet, you can see stuff going on here. And look at the design of the cabinet. It's not a simple cabinet na okay, it's divided like this, one, two, three, one, two, three. It's not like that. It's just static. There's movement. So there's an open cabinet, and then the, the lower half of the cabinet is shaped like this. Magkakaiba sila ng shape. And then there's stuff here lying around. Again, the boxes here have different shapes. Okay? And an overlap. Kumbaga, ito yung box. And then there's stuff overlapping that box. Again, creating interest. So, overlaps here again. Yan siya. You can see here a framing device. Diba? You see here this light lamp or lampshade pointing here. Kumbaga, that sort of placement is very intentional. This placement of the lamp or this light serves as an arrow to point out to a focal point here. Okay? Another thing here, tingnan nyo shape. So he could opt to just create something like this, a very simple shape like that. But he also added this one, the support frame here to create interest, to create overlap with this tube right here. So when he added this one, this diagonal frame, he pushed back the space because that frame is overlapping the tubular shape or the cylinder of the costume. So ito yung costume, tinakpan niya ganyan. So by using that device, this one is further pushed back in space. Okay, so you can see it here, this frame here, like that. So the space is pushed back. Also, another thing to push the space, to improve the space, naglagay siya ng elevation. So that elevation again creates illusion. The space na parang, oh wow, talagang ano siya. It's something that you can walk into. Another thing here, you have a stairs going down or going up, either way. But again, this hint that there's a space beyond this room again makes it more alive. Na hindi lang siya, it's a closed room with just stuff going on. You know that outside of this room, there's more stuff beyond that. Maybe this one is above. Pag akyat mo dito, maybe yan yung normal niyang bahay. Maybe this is a secret base. Diba? And look at this, another device. Overlap. Overlap here and here, a combination of shape. Then it's going to be overlapping the space at the back. At the same, again, overlap creates more space. Tandaan nyo yun lagi. And, what else? What else? What else? Again, overlap here. Now, guys, this is something I want you guys to avoid. Now, this one, now let's say ito. Let's say you have this one, right? The shape of the cabinet. You don't want the shape of this chair to land exactly at that same line. You don't want this. Okay, this is what we call a tangent. Okay, so a tangent is something that happens when the two edges of an object are perfectly aligned. Kunyari ito, naganyan sila. Okay, that destroys the space or the illusion of the space. Kumaga, let's say ito yung phone ko. Diba? Naka-foreground. And then, meron akong background element ganito. So, magka-tangent siya pag ganito. You see both edges, the edge here, the edge here. They're not at the same distance, but mukha silang magkatabi. But from the side view, they're pretty far from each other. But because of their meeting point, yung edges nila, this one, this edge here, again, this edge here, nagdikit, it looks like they're at the same plane. But again, they're not. So you try to avoid that. So, ito, hindi siya nakatangent. Okay? So you try to avoid that. Okay? Another thing, another design element here, tingnan nyo. A diagonal shape again to frame this shape here. And at the same time, guys, he could have opted to design this cane here. Maybe have it upright like this. But again, to provide character, maybe nag-slide ng konti yung cane. Maybe tinamad siya ipatong yung cane na maayos. He just wanted it to rest like this. It's either to show character dun sa may-ari ng room, or it's gonna be a design choice because he wanted to have two shapes like this. Decorate interest. Okay, so when you're designing or you're placing stuff in your shot, it has to have a motivation. Is it a design choice or is it a story choice? Hindi lang pwedeng, okay sir, nilagay ko kasi ganyan lang. Gusto ko lang ganyan. Okay, it's either, kasi sir, it looks cool, it's a good shape, it creates a more interesting composition on my part, or, sir, kasi ano, this is a story, or this is a storytelling element, kasi ganito yung bida ko, ganyan-ganyan. There's always a reason, there's always a why, there's always a motivation. In that way, you can create a interesting composition. So you always have to think, okay, bakit ko ilalagay ito? Ano kaya meron dito? By going in depth with those things, your rooms will look unique. And based on your compositions, um, I can see that if you're trying to really, really go in depth with your shots. Okay, questions so far? Questions? You guys good? Okay. So, itong pinakita ko na to, this one is a final quality. Okay, yung thumbnail, it look a bit more, has to look a bit more loose. Oh, not this one. Nasaan na yun? For example, saan ba yung thumbnail ko kanina? Right here. Let's zoom in. Tingnan nyo ha. Very, very rough. Scribbles, actually. But, although, yes, these are scribbles, I made sure na naka-perspective pa rin sila. Kasi again, the priority of creating thumbnails is to explore ideas. Okay, here's another example. Here's a looser sketch. Diba? If you zoom in, the details are not really still well defined, but the perspective is there. It has good perspective. Let's see. Another example could be, for example, this one. Okay, very, very loose. Although this one is a bit small, super late na thumbnail, but this one's okay too. Diba? Very loose scribbles. So you want it to be loose. Focus on your creativity. Uh, let's see another example. And for example, ito. This one's mine. Okay. So very, very loose scribbles once again. But again, I made sure the perspective is right. Kasi when I do the final, ito siya. Diba? Here's a cleaned up line. And then color is gonna be like this. Okay? So yan siya. So any questions so far? Okay, wala. Uh, Another thing to keep in mind, guys, is you have to have a bunch of references. For example, here, diba? You have to always have reference. Kasi di mo pwedeng sabihin, sir, yung thumbnail ko lahat, it's from the mind, sir. No, no, that's not good. That's not a good mindset to have. You always have to research. So that will yield a more interesting design, a more interesting composition on your part. You can't just rely on what you have here. Kasi for the most part, honestly, it's gonna be the same thing that you've been seeing your whole life. It's gonna be based from your influences. But that's not enough, di ba? You could combine what you have here, and you also combine it with your references in what you see sa internet or from the outside. You can take pictures if you want. Okay? Kasi that's the thing here. Yung number one thing when you're starting this new research, do you have good references? Do you have good ideas? So good ideas also come from research. Okay, so ayan, kunwari ganyan. Okay, so questions so far wala. Okay, so let's take a short break. Okay, guys, so you start to think of your ideas. As we take a break, kumaga, let it simmer. Let's say you're washing dishes, maybe you're doing your laundry, you're taking a walk, you're having your coffee. You try to think of what's gonna happen, diba? Before you execute your ideas, try to have it simmer in your head. Okay, tingin-tingin kayo sa Pinterest or online, you look outside, look at your own room, and you start to explore ideas. Ano kaya maganda yung room? And then there's gonna be a moment there, okay, may spark. Oops, ting, 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 light bulb idea. And from there, isipin nyo lang, hold it in, and then you go back, you draw it. Ganun siya. Well, that's for me. That's how I work. Sometimes yung ideas ko, it simmers when I'm washing my dishes. Doon ako nag-iisip. I'm doing mindless stuff, but my mind here is working. Kasi sometimes ganun siya, eh. 'Di ba? Sometimes when you dream, pagising mo, okay, may idea ako kasi the mind or the brain works that way, mysteriously. Kumbaga, subconsciously, it's starting to simmer down the ideas, yung melting pot. And then, one of these moments, dilataw yan. Yes, yes, Victoria. Pwede din. It can be from your own original character. That's also good. Okay, as long as artist siya, dapat may workstation. Ganun. Okay, any more questions before we take a short break? None? Okay, so guys, we'll be back in 20 minutes. Okay, and then afterwards, I'll show you how to do maybe I'll show you how to do thumbnails. Then afterwards, I'm gonna leave the rest of the period for you guys to do your own thumbnails. Because I will be checking this thumbnail next week. Okay, first thing in the morning, I will approve it. Yun na. Okay? Okay, I'll be back. Okay, bye bye.